Hello everybody, today I'm going to show you how I approach recording a clean and spacious electric guitar that has a slight bite to it. It is a sound that you can use in any style ranging from pop music to dance music and even some ambient sounding music. And I've been wanting to make some music production tutorials for some time now, so without further ado, let's get creative. The guitar that I used for today's recording is a Fender Stratocaster set to its neck pickup. And for the recording I plugged my guitar directly into my audio interface and used an amp simulator and plugins to sculpt my sound. This is what the final result sounds like. So let's dive into the project and recreate this sound. So here I have the original guitar sample, and by itself it sounds like this. So as you can hear, it sounds very dull and it's quite a bit softer as well. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add an amp simulator to this track. I prefer Native Instruments Guitar Rig number 6, which is the newest one, but you can use any amp simulator that you like. And I'm just going to take a clean guitar preset. And I used a clean preset from this amp and I just tweaked a couple of settings. And now it sounds like this. So the thing with recording your guitar digitally is that you have a lot more frequency information than that you'd have when you record with a regular cabinet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an EQ. And I'm only going to be adjusting the high pass and the low pass filter. The high pass filter, I'm going to set it to approximately 140 to 150 Hertz. And the low pass filter, I'm going to set it to around 6.5K more or less. So now it sounds like this. So the frequency information that we have after these cutoffs is more similar to a regular amp cabinet. In the digital domain, it's very easy to get too many high frequencies, so you need to watch out for that, especially when you're recording a clean and more mellow sounding guitar. The next thing that I'm going to do to this track is add a compressor to smooth things out a bit. So what I'm going to do with the compressor is I'm going to set the attack relatively fast because I want to catch most of the transients. And the release time I'm going to leave it as is from the stock settings. I'm going to set the compression ratio to 4.5 and I'm going to have a little bit of a soft knee setting of 4.5 dB. What I want to do is I want to have a high pass filter on the detector input of the compressor. And what that means is that the compressor will listen less to the low frequencies. In this case, it's going to ignore the frequencies below 182 Hz. I'm doing that because the bass frequencies carry more energy than the high frequencies. So by applying this filter, the compressor will react more smoothly across the frequency spectrum. And now what I want to do is I want to have a couple of dB gain reduction. And I'm going to achieve this by lowering the threshold until where I find it suitable. So let's try. So this is nice. Now you see around 2.5 to 3 dB gain reduction, and that's what I'm going for. So as you might remember, I said that I wanted to have a clean and spacious guitar sound with a bite. So now I'm going to add that bite sound, and I'm going to do that by adding a distortion plugin or a saturation plugin. And in my case, I'm using the Decapitator from SoundToys. But instead of adding the distortion on the same track as the electric guitar, I'm going to have the distortion on a separate track and use parallel processing. I have this track set as a template, so it already has a couple of plugins on it. First thing that I need to do is I need to route this track to send the audio information to this track, because otherwise nothing is playing, because there's no audio on this track itself. So I'm going to route this track to this track, and in Reaper you just do it by dragging the route. And it's very important that you have the dry and wet settings all the way to wet, so that means that you will only hear the processed signal. Because the thing is, you already have the dry signal here above, so you don't want to duplicate that. Right now still the drive is set to 0, so nothing will be done to the signal, so I want to increase the drive and I'll do it while playing. there we hear it working. I want to add a low cut to avoid too much lows being fed into the distortion plugin. Now my only problem is that it sounds a bit harsh, and at certain points you have more distortion than at other points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a compressor before the distortion plugin to even out the signal to more or less have the same distortion overall. So what I want to do is I want to have a relatively slow release and a relatively fast attack time. I've set all the parameters to how I like them. Now let's just adjust the threshold until I have more or less 5 dB gain reduction throughout. Okay, I'm satisfied with how it sounds so far. And now I want to add a couple of dB makeup gain. The next thing that I want to tackle is I find the distortion to be a bit too harsh, especially in the high frequencies, and it's a bit muddy in the low frequencies. So we're going to take out some of these frequencies, and we do that with an EQ. So I've set my high pass filter to around 400 Hz, and I've set my low pass filter to about 3K. And this is what it sounds like now. So you still have the distortion sound, but you don't have the harsh frequencies anymore. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend two signals together. I find the distortion signal to be too loud, so I'm going to lower the volume of this track to blend it in better. Because I want this distortion to be a subtle detail and to enhance the sound, not to overtake the sound. I've set this track to minus 14 dB and it blends in really nicely. So now what I want to do is I want to add these two tracks into a folder so that I can process them at the same time. So what I'm going to do on this track is I'm going to add a compression to smooth out both tracks a bit. And I'm going to add an EQ to take out some of the frequencies that I find to be unwanted. So what I've done here with this EQ is I took out some of the frequencies that I did not like. So I made a small dip, and this compressor here is just smoothing out the signal and is taking about 2 dB gain reduction. And with this compressor, I'm taking out some of the peaks in the signal because I find that some attacks are a bit too sharp. So I want to reduce only those attacks. So I need to have a very fast attack time and a relatively fast release time. The next thing that I want to do is add some ambience to the guitar. So I'm going to add a reverb track, but again, instead of putting it on the track itself, I'm going to do it with parallel processing because I feel I have more control over the sound when I do this. So what I want to do is add a small ambience because later on I'm going to add more reverb effects. So I don't want to stack reverb on reverb on reverb. I want to give each of them their separate function. And this one will function as just giving it some small ambience of a small room or a small plate. In this case I'm using the little plate from Soundtoys. And I'm using a decay time of 1.23 seconds. And I have a low cut set on 161 Hz. And of course, again, the plugin is on 100% wet signal because I don't want any dry signal in my reverb track. The only thing that this plugin is missing is a setting to make the initial attack later. So what I mean by that is now when the guitar track plays, also now you'll immediately have reverb sound. And I don't want this. I want to separate the guitar a little bit from the reverb. So to delay the initial attack of the reverb, I added a delay plugin in front of it. And again, of course, this one is set to 100% wet. And as you can see here, I have 20 milliseconds delay time. But before, of course, I can hear any signal, I need to route the audio from my folder track to the reverb track. So let's give it a listen. So you can definitely hear that the reverb is working, but I find it to add a bit too much mud and also a bit too many high frequencies that I don't like. And also I think the level is a bit too high, so we need to adjust the send level. So we need to adjust how much of the audio signal from this folder track is being sent to my reverb track. So first of all, I'm going to take out some of the frequency information that I don't like, and then I'm going to adjust the send level. And what I did here is I took out some of the low end, and also I took out some of the high end, but not that much. It's around 7K is the low pass filter, and the high pass filter is set to about 600 Hz to take out some of the muddiness. Also, I have a band set here to 633 to dip some of the 500 and 600 Hz frequencies because I find them to be a bit boxy. So I really want this reverb to go a bit to the background and more to be like a subtle ambience than to be an effect by itself. Now it sounds like this, the tracks together. And just compare it quickly to how it would sound without the EQ. You can hear that it's a lot more subtle. Now I want to adjust the send level because I don't want this reverb to be my main reverb. So I'm going to adjust this into the routing page. And I think I'm going to set it about, let's say, -10. So you see it's very subtle, it's on the background, but it definitely does add some ambience. So the next thing that I want to do is add a ping pong delay to create more of a stereo image and more stereo interest. The delay unit that I'm using is Echoboy from SoundToys, but you can use any delay that's capable of doing a ping pong delay. The delay unit is listening to the tempo of a track, which is 81 BPM. As you can see here, and I have set the right signal to have a delay time of an 8th triplet and the left signal to have the delay time of an 8th note. So what happens, first it goes to the left signal and it has a delay time of an 8th note, and then it goes to the right signal and it has a delay time of an 8th note triplet, and then it goes back and has a delay time of an 8th note again. So that's how it works. But of course now I need to send my signal first from my folder track to my delay track, and now it sounds like this. So you can hear it bouncing, but it's way too much, of course. And again, I want to take out some of the frequencies to push this delay effect a bit to the background and be more part of an ambience than an effect by itself. So I have my high pass filter set to about 412 Hz. Could be more, could be less. And I'm doing this because I don't want to have a low frequency buildup in my track. And I'm taking a bit of the high frequencies out with a high shelf, because the more highs you take out, the more the sound will blend with the original signal. So it will stick out less. So the only thing that I mind is that you hear the attack really clearly. So what I want to do is, while the original signal is playing, I want the attacks of the delays to be a bit more squashed. So how I'm going to achieve this is I'm going to add a compressor to this track, but the compressor is not going to listen to the track that it's on, but the compressor is going to listen to a different track, which in this case will be my guitar folder. So when the guitar folder plays, this compressor will hold down the signal of my ping pong delay track. So I also increased the gain a bit from this track because I want to have a bit more volume. And now as you can see that this compressor is taking out 5 dBs every time when the original track kicks in. And that means that our delayed signal will be reduced with 5 dB gain reduction. So you see this delay is becoming more of an ambient layer than that it's really a delay that's in your face. The next thing that I want to do is I want to adjust the send level of how much of the signal from this guitar folder is being sent to the ping pong delay, because I still find it to be a bit too loud. So I try it out and I think about -8 will do the trick. So you see it's more to the background, and I find it to be more subtle and a bit more attractive. So the next thing that I want to do, and the final thing that I want to do, is I want to add more reverb. But I'm not going to add reverb on the original guitar track, but I'm going to add reverb to the ping pong delay signal. So the delay signal will also have reverb to it. And again, I'm going to do this with parallel processing, so the reverb will have its own track. And I always find myself using the Valhalla VintageVerb. It's really a great reverb plugin, and it's actually quite cheap as well. So definitely check out their website, because it's an investment you will not regret. I have it set to the concert hall mode with a decay time of 3.41 seconds, and it has a pre-delay of 20 milliseconds. So that's actually the same as the delay that our plate reverb has. But I don't have to do it with a separate plugin because it's built into this plugin already. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to route the ping pong delay to my VintageVerb channel. And now if I solo these two tracks to see what they sound like. And now when you listen to the delay sound, it has this kind of ethereal sound to it, which is really great because it's going to add so much sauce to our original guitar track. The only thing that I'm going to do again is I'm going to take out some of the low frequencies from the reverb, because reverb just tends to add so much boom in the low frequencies and it's going to muddy up your entire mix. Especially with these long reverbs, you want to be careful with how much low end you have. So I'm going to scoop it out with a high pass filter set to approximately 700 Hz. And now it sounds like this. And now all of the tracks together. So you see the delay and the reverb, they really create an ambience behind the guitar, but it's not distracting you. I mean, I can increase all the reverb levels that I want and have it drown in reverb, but that's not the effect that I was going for. I was going for a clean and spacious guitar sound. So now you know how I sculpt some of my guitar sounds. And if you like this kind of music production tutorials, let me know in the comments, or if there are any more questions, of course let me know as well. And in the meantime, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel. And for now, see you next time.